everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Heroes. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
And today we're talking about X-Men Dark Phoenix. Or just Dark Phoenix, depending on... this is one of those weird instances where they kind of changed the title after it was released. Because in theaters, it was just Dark Phoenix, but then on home video, it became X-Men Dark Phoenix, which I actually kind of prefer, but that's just me. Anyway, released in 2019, written and directed by Simon Kinberg, and starring everybody from First Class and Days of Future Past and Apocalypse and Jessica Chastain. That's pretty much it. This is the final X-Men film of the First Class cast, and really just the final. I mean, the New Mutants came out after this, but really just the final X-Men movie until, basically the Disney purchased Fox, I think, sometime during the release of this film, because the Blu-ray is a Disney release. And so now, the plan, I believe, is to introduce the X-Men into the MCU. So I don't believe these movies are going to continue, which is probably good. It's probably about time. So, Stu, I hated this film when I saw it in the theater, and rewatching it for this, I don't feel like it was quite as bad as I remembered it being, but it's still not very good. What was your initial reaction when you saw it?
I didn't see it in the theater. It was kind of on purpose. Like I wasn't necessarily avoiding it. It just wasn't very high on my priority list. And of course, I heard all the reactions to it, and heard how people were saying that it was even worse than Last Stand. But when I first saw it, my reaction was that wasn't nearly as bad as people were saying it was. Still not great,
right?
But there are some things that I really like about this movie. And then there are some things that are not so great. But I guess that same statement can be made about the franchise as a whole.
Or a lot of the X-Men movies.
Personally, I think this is a decent movie. It's passable. As an adaptation to the Dark Phoenix source material, no, it's not. It's not very good. But just as a movie on its own, it's acceptable.
It's still kind of bottom of the barrel for me in terms of X-Men films. It is interesting that they just can't seem to get the Jean Grey Phoenix/Dark Phoenix saga told on screen. They kind of failed with it in Last Stand, and they failed with it in this movie. Will we ever see it again? I don't know. I kind of hope not. Like, we've had 2 chances at it. Like, let's just forget about it. But I don't know. Maybe the MCU will go the Dark Phoenix route. We'll see. But
I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not either. I would like to know what are some of the aspects of the film that you really like about it. What's some of the stuff that you love?
Well, for one, the way it looks. I love the way this movie is shot. It looks, the way it's shot kind of matches its tone. This is, one of the darker films of the franchise. And it looks very dramatic, for lack of a better term. It's not shot like a superhero movie. The colors are kind of muted, and I don't know what camera this was shot on, but it's really, really crispy. I watched the 4K, and it looks fantastic on 4K. So yeah, I think that stands out the most, just the way the movie looks. It's very visually pleasing to me. Second, Charles's storyline. They use this movie to address something that is a big issue with Charles's character in general, but specifically in these movies. And despite this movie's many flaws, the way they handled Charles's arc is great. I'll double down on that. I love the way they put him in a position of, So like the X-Men are like world renowned now. Like everybody loves the X-Men. They are the Avengers in this universe. Everybody knows
Right.
and loves the X-Men. The president calls them up. He got like an X-Men phone.
He's got his own X phone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and it's this is Charles's dream. And he says, you've turned to calling us superheroes. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's better than what you used to call us.
Right.
And you can see how his pride has infected him, and he is constantly putting these kids in danger because of his pride. And that's something that I've always felt about Charles, even before they kind of addressed it in this movie. But to see them finally address it in this movie, definitely put a smile on my face. And his students are, they're not afraid to call him out on it. Especially Mystique, who I'm not too fond of in this movie, but that's kind of it's just a trajectory of the character in the franchise. Like, she is like a full on good guy, and I don't like it. But even Hank, he calls out Charles on it. He's like, this is all your fault. You thought that your sense of your pride and your need to control has caused all of this trouble. Everything that's happening with Jean right now is your fault. If we had just carried on the mission, as like, once we got those people out of there, but you had to showboat. You used Jean to showboat, and now look at what you've done. So I do really, really appreciate that aspect of the movie.
Well, that's cool. I can understand that, and I can appreciate that too. I think that is one of the redeeming qualities of the film is Charles's arc. I 100% agree with you about Mystique. She just doesn't work for me in this film, but again, we've talked about this in the previous movies, like the fact that they just kind of completely changed her character because Jennifer Lawrence became a movie star, and they felt like they kind of had to put her in the hero role rather than the villain role. Mm-hmm. Just seeing her be like the leader of the X-Men is just weird, and it just doesn't work for me. I think they could have, obviously it doesn't work for me, but at the same time, because they set it up in First Class that like Raven and Charles were friends, that part of it kind of works. Their relationship, I guess, kind of works, but overall, Mystique just doesn't work for me in the film, and I don't really know how else to really describe it other than that I just don't like seeing Mystique as a hero. But it's also just, I don't know. I was going to say Beast, Hank McCoy could have easily had those concerns that she raises and yells at Charles about, you're putting these kids' lives in danger and stuff. But it's just Raven the whole movie that kind of, the whole time she's on screen is the one kind of pushing him on it. And Hank doesn't really say anything up until Raven is killed off. And then he's the one that says, this is all your fault and all this stuff. But I don't know. It just Mystique in the movie just does feel like Jennifer Lawrence is a big movie star now. We've got to have her be the leader of the X-Men, and her contract is up. So we're going to kill her off halfway through the film.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. Just the whole Mystique part of this movie is bizarre to me. I will say the movie does look pretty good. The biggest thing that I love about the movie is Hans Zimmer's score. The fact that somebody convinced Hans Zimmer to come back, because he had said he was kind of done doing superhero movies. Mm-hmm. And then his name is on this film, and the music, especially in the beginning when they're flying to space and everything, that music is so good.
Yeah, the theme for this movie that he composed for this movie is fantastic. The score in general is great throughout, but the theme for this movie is amazing. I listen to it often. I've listened to the score more than I've watched the movie.
Right. Yeah, me too. Yeah, this is actually, watching it for the podcast was only the second time I'd seen it, because I had seen it in the theater and I bought the Blu-ray just because I'm a completist and I have all the other X-Men films. I got to have this one. Mm-hmm. But I had not watched it since I had seen it in the theater because I just remember it being bad. And it's not as bad as I remember. Like you said, it's passable, I guess. It's adequate.
Yeah, the thing is, you gotta like I said, if you're looking at it just as an adaptation, you're gonna be pissed off the whole time. But sure, if you just if you just look at it as just a singular entity, just one movie, one story, forget what you've read in the comics. It's right. Okay. It's okay. I mean, the to me the biggest crime of this movie is the villain. The villain is horrendous. They're terrible. They're so boring. I'm still not quite sure what they were doing.
Yeah.
Why they were looking for Jean.
No, I have a big problem with the villain too. Boring is the best way to describe them. Jessica Chastain is such a great actress, and yet the villain is so boring. And it's just, they're aliens who were chasing after that power or that cloud thing. And when it got into Jean, they were like, they had to follow her to Earth or follow it to Earth to try to harness it. I don't know. Like you said, I know this movie was hit with like studio interference. I believe there were some reshoots and some studio interference. I'd be very curious to see Simon Kinberg's original cut of the film, or even just read his original draft of the script. I would like to know what all got changed, but I feel like the villains probably got changed.
The villains, I can't remember where I read this, but originally the villains were Skrulls.
Oh, okay.
Which is why they're shapeshifters.
Right.
Kevin Feige got wind of that. It was like, no, we have plans for the Skrulls later in the MCU. Change their name and their appearance. They can still be shapeshifters, but you can't call them that, and they can't look like that. Now, as far as the storyline and how that connects to the Phoenix Force, I'm not sure, but I do know that they were originally supposed to be Skrulls.
That would have been more interesting, and it really kind of drives me crazy. I understand, like, if the villains in this movie had been the Skrulls, that would have been the first live action Skrulls, I guess, and maybe Kevin Feige wanted his version of the Skrulls to be the first live action Skrulls. But I've read a couple of things. Warner Brothers is notorious for this, where like they wouldn't let and part of this is, I think, there was a rights issue involved as well. But like they wouldn't let Smallville have Bruce Wayne or Batman be on the show because Batman Begins was coming out, and they didn't want to confuse audiences or something.
They're doing the same thing right now with Superman and Lois and Superman Legacy. They didn't want two big names
competing
it's like, it's Superman. People are going to watch it no matter what. Like I don't understand. Like Superman Returns and Smallville was like it was on at the same time, and nobody was confused. Nobody was confused.
The only thing I remember happening when Superman Returns was announced when I think it was when they announced Brandon Routh was going to be Superman. I remember reading on the internet people being like, why not Tom Welling? Why isn't Tom Welling doing it? But other than that, there was no confusion. There were like people went to go see the movie and then were like, a completely different actor was playing Lex Luthor or something. It's like, but yeah, I remember that's exactly what I read that the other day, that their Superman and Lois is ending because Superman Legacy is going into production. Yeah. And they, for whatever reason, are terrified of having a Superman on TV while there's a Superman in theaters. It just doesn't it makes absolutely no sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense to me. However, I will say this. I'm glad that Superman and Lois, hopefully, is going off on a high note, because the CW is notorious for overstaying its welcome with their shows. And we're right at the 4th season mark. Like it always happens when you get 3 good seasons out of a show, and once it gets to that 4th season, that's when it starts going downhill. So hopefully this will be the 4th season that will be good. I know that Legends of Tomorrow kind of had the opposite effect. It kind of got better as it went along. I haven't seen it, so I can't say whether that's true or not. But the Flash, Arrow, the Flash, they
all overstayed their welcome.
Yeah, the Flash disappointed me so much because it started off so strong. Like I've watched the first 3 seasons several times, and then I just stopped because once it gets to season, because that's the thing. Like season 4 isn't bad. It just doesn't hold a candle to the first 3 seasons, and then once it gets after season 4, it just drives off a cliff.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was I don't know what Kevin Feige's reasoning behind not allowing them to have the Skrulls in there, other than maybe they wanted the first live action appearance of the Skrulls to be an MCU film, not a 20th Century Fox film.
Mm-hmm.
But changing the villains to these just generic shape-shifting aliens who are tough to fight, but other than that have no other qualities or no other personality or anything, just makes them super boring villains. The final act of the film doesn't really feel like an X-Men film. It's the whole train sequence and all that and stuff. It's a decent like set piece, but it just feels lacking. We've said that with a couple other movies recently. It just feels lacking. And I'm curious how much got changed after the shooting had, finished and they had to do reshoots and all that stuff. I don't know.
How do you feel about their uniforms in this movie?
I think those are boring too. They're okay. The X across, but they all have the exact same uniform. It's kind of a throwback, I guess, to First Class. But again, I will say this until I die. This movie is set in the 90s. It should have had the classic 90s costumes. And you set it up at the end of Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Right. So not doing that is just a crime.
I agree. These uniforms are right out of the comic, though. I think these are the Astonishing X-Men uniforms. So they do they do rip them straight out of the comic. But I agree. Translated to live action, they're boring.
Yeah, and it's been a long Astonishing X-Men. If I recall, I think I only read like the first couple of issues of that. Wasn't that a Joss Whedon written comic?
I'm not sure.
Don't they all have they kind of look like this, but don't they all have different costumes to just look a little, or are they all the same? Is it kind of like this where they're all the same across the board?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know. I can picture it. I'm not sure if that's Astonishing X-Men though.
This is the image I think of when I think of Astonishing X-Men, which I believe was at the very end of the first issue. So they're all similar, but they're a little different for each character. And I remember that being kind of the point of Astonishing X-Men.
Right.
Because they had gotten into, I think because of the movies, they had gotten into these more generic, not really costumes,
Yeah, they're more like uniforms.
And Joss Whedon wanted to bring them back. Yeah, put them back in the uniforms. Or put them back in the costumes. And you could argue that they are uniforms in this film. They are, you become an X-Men and this is your uniform that you wear on your missions and stuff. But it just, to me, it's just a little boring. There's also some characters who I feel are just wasted in this film. Quicksilver's Quicksilver actually gets a cool moment in the beginning in space. But then he's injured by Jean Grey, and then you never see him for the rest of the film because he's out, because he's broken his leg or whatever. And then Magneto. I just feel like Magneto's kind of wasted in this film too.
I agree.
You know, I like the idea that they've been given kind of this sanctuary, this like land that they're allowed to be on and use the land, and as long as they, you know, don't commit crimes and stuff. But then he finds out that Jean Grey killed Raven, and he's on a revenge mission, and it just feels like they didn't know what to do with Magneto, but they needed to have him in the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing about Magneto, they have exhausted him. Throughout these movies, they did with Magneto what the MCU has done with Thor. They've given him every arc you can have.
Right.
And they've run out of things to do. So they exhausted all of his arcs, but they had to shoehorn him in the movie somehow, and that did not serve him at all. I would have rather him just not been in the movie.
Yeah, me same here. Yeah, the space scene in the beginning is kind of cool, but it also is. I mean, it's an X-Men film. You got to suspend your disbelief a little bit. Yeah. But them flying the Quinjet, is that what it's called? Or is that the Avengers?
No, the Blackbird.
Yeah. The Blackbird. Them flying that up into space. I was like, how are they, once they're in space, like it doesn't have, I mean, unless Hank did install it, but it doesn't have like thrusters and stuff. Like, how do they get back? But I just assumed maybe they were planning on Jean to telekinetically move them back, but then she's kind of out of it once she gets hit by the Phoenix Force.
Yeah, they don't.
So I don't know how they get back.
Yeah, they don't show it. They just
they gloss. They
show
over
her get They show her get out of the Phoenix Force, and then hey, we're on the ground. Yay, X-Men.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I remember thinking that though, because he says in the beginning, he's like, I know what you're thinking, but we can't do it. He's like, didn't you install new boosters or whatever? He's like, yeah, that's for acceleration, not elevation. And then the president asks, and he's like, all right, we'll go. And they have no trouble flying into space. But then once they're in space, I remember thinking, I'm like, now what? Like, this thing is not designed for space. How are you? And Storm uses her powers in space, which I thought was also kind of interesting, because don't you need like an atmosphere?
Yeah.
For weather?
Yeah.
But whatever. I guess, it's fine, I guess.
Now you got me thinking. I was like, how did she do that?
That would have been interesting if Mystique had been like, Storm, seal up those cracks. And she's like, I can't. I'm not actually sure why I came along with you guys to space. I did like, though, speaking of that scene, I did like the built-in thing for Cyclops where his seat goes down and then he puts his visor into the gunner looking thing and he's able to shoot the blast out of the Blackbird. I thought that was cool. Yeah,
that was cool. We see Jean Grey's origin story, and she basically caused a car accident that killed her mother, and her father was both afraid of her and angry with her for that.
Right.
I got mixed feelings about. I don't understand how someone can be that upset with a kid who doesn't know what they're doing.
Right.
It just doesn't sit right with me.
Right. I agree. And I'm sure people like that exist, but I can understand being afraid because this is something that you don't know what it is. The mutants, I guess technically mutants had been around for a while because the First Class was kind of the first introduction, I guess. But anyway, still, if you hadn't had any contact with mutants or anything, and all of a sudden your daughter is displaying these powers, I can understand being afraid of it, especially since she just caused this car crash and stuff.
Right.
But I agree, being because it's not like he, I know we only see the one scene, but he seems like he's a nice dad in the car,
Yeah.
Talking about the classic music and stuff like that. And so if he had been portrayed as kind of a jerk
Mm-hmm.
from the get-go, then maybe I could believe it a little more.
Yeah.
But just abandoning your child like that. And I don't know. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of tough to swallow.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about it too, because I do kind of like the idea that it happened. And then when Jean Grey finds out about it, she's very upset, obviously. But even after, like, he's still angry about it. That's the other kind of crazy thing about it.
It's like all of this has happened. She's come back. It's like, and you still, I don't buy it, man.
Right. I agree. Like, it would almost be easier to swallow if she had shown up and he had just been felt like so guilty, like that he had basically, given her away, and felt like a need to kind of felt like he couldn't reach out because he thought that she would hate him or something, and he wouldn't be able to live with himself. But instead he like doesn't want her to be in the house. And then she kind of pushes him and he lashes out and is like, "You're the reason my wife is dead. You took everything from me." And yeah, it just feels very convenient for the character of, for Jean Grey. It's convenient for her to get angry. It's something that it just feels untrue.
Right.
Is it in the comics? I'm not super familiar with Jean Grey, and I'm not familiar really honestly with the Phoenix or Dark Phoenix story. I actually was going to watch the old animated series and try to watch the Phoenix episodes and the Dark Phoenix episodes, but I didn't have time. But is it in the comics that Charles? Because remember in Last Stand, he had like put like a mental block on her or something to like keep that Phoenix force kind of at bay. And then in this film, he's kept the whole idea that her dad was alive from her. Like, is it just like a common thing in the comics that Charles is constantly keeping things or
I believe
doing
so.
some sort? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe so.
I always thought that was kind of, I don't know. I mean, he does it in both films. He's saying he's doing it to kind of protect her, but it's one of those things where it's always kind of, it's like a morally gray area of Charles.
I'm not seeing anything like that, but
yeah, I was just curious. I thought it was because I guess it's not exactly the same thing from both movies. In Last Stand, it's really him putting, if I recall, putting some sort of mental block on her so that she can't use like her full power because she's just too powerful, basically. And in this one, it's him keeping a big secret that her dad is still alive. Yeah. Just keeping that from her for her whole life, basically. But I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing that both movies had some like a similar doing something without Jean's knowledge, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And the thing about that, like doing something without her knowledge, I prefer
the Last Stand.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of, like you said, putting up these mental blocks, trying to keep that power at bay. And the thing about The Last Stand is that the biggest issue of that movie is that it's convoluted. There's too much going on. In that movie. I love the idea of the cure, and I don't love it, but I was okay. I was kind of okay with how they handled Dark Phoenix, but it should have had its own movie.
Right. They tried to put too much into one movie.
Yeah,
I
like
agree.
you had two major you had two A storylines,
right, competing
in one movie, and the one that should have been the A storyline was the B storyline.
Right. That movie is obviously very flawed as well. I still think I'd watch that movie over this one.
I would as well. I agree. I agree. The Last Stand. I think we owe The Last Stand an apology. And not just because of this movie, but there are movies that have come out before and after that that are so much worse.
Right.
So much worse. Thor: Love and Thunder is a significantly worse movie than X-Men: The Last Stand, and I will die on that hill.
Right.
Yeah, but it's again, it's the biggest crime of that movie is that it's too much going on, but it's a fun movie. I love the third act of that movie.
Yeah, me too. And well, I just love a lot of the actors and characters in that film. Kelsey Grammer's Beast in that film is just amazing. Ben Foster's Angel is good. He's just doesn't get enough time in that movie. Yeah, he's underutilized. But yeah, and then of course, we've got the classic cast, which I still love. But out of the original trilogy, it's the worst one. But I still like it more than this film, more than Apocalypse. It's. Mm-hmm. I agree. I think we owe it an apology. Everybody kind of hated on it when it first came out, but then 20th Century Fox said, "You think that was bad? Wait till we show you some of this other stuff." But I'd watch Last Stand over X-Men Origins too.
As would I.
I don't hate the actors in this film either. Like I think I prefer the original cast, but also that was. You were a kid when when the first one came out. I was a teenager when it came out. Like I have a kind of a soft spot in my heart for that original cast.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Tyler Sheridan as Scott is good in this movie. I think Sophie Turner as Jean Grey is good. And Nicholas Hoult as Hank McCoy is really good, even though I've never really felt like he was physically the right choice for Hank McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a great actor, so I think he does a great job.
I've never liked his look, like his Beast look.
Right. Me neither.
They change it every movie.
I was going to bring that up because if you look at him in this movie compared to First Class, it is wildly different.
Wildly different.
Yeah. And I honestly don't know which one because it does change each movie. This one looks similar. Like Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and this movie kind of all look somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
But First Class looks way different. And First Class actually looks more kind of like how I've seen Beast kind of portrayed in comics, where they kind of almost give him like a cat-like face.
Look. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know which, but I remember not really liking it when First Class came out either. So I don't know which Beast look for Nicholas Hoult I would like, but I agree. I don't love the Beast looks or design of Nicholas Holt's Beast in any of these films.
But I mean, Kelsey Grammer was perfection.
Right.
Yeah. He was perfection. I mean, it also helps that he just naturally looks like
and sounds like him too.
Beast.
Yeah. Right.
So that was a match made in comic book movie heaven. So
I agree. I don't have anything else. I mean, the final act really isn't all that worth talking about. I mean, the train sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And although I will say this, I find it also interesting that didn't Simon Kinberg have a writing credit on The Last Stand? I kind of think he might have.
Maybe.
So I just found it interesting. Like in The Last Stand, there's that moving jail cell that's on a truck that's constantly moving. And that's why they're having trouble finding Mystique. And that's where they find Juggernaut and Multiple Man and all that stuff. And this movie does something very similar. There's a moving jail cell, but it's on a train.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember thinking the weird, like these movies are not obviously exact like replicas of each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought it was interesting how there's kind of these weird similarities in both films.
Yeah.
And that was one of them that really stood out, was this idea of this moving jail or whatever.
Yeah, I think writers do that without even knowing that
without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the final act is all basically that whole kind of train sequence, and it's not really anything to write home about. So I don't really have much to say about it.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll go straight into a rating. I think for me, this is, I was going to say this earlier, and I think we got distracted. I don't know which one I would choose. If I had to sit down and pick whether or not to watch this or Apocalypse, I don't know which one I would choose because I feel like they're both not great. So I'm going to give it the same score that I gave Apocalypse, which is 2 out of 5 Phoenix Forces.
I'm gonna give it 2.5. For me, this movie is like just straight down the middle. Like,
yeah,
if it's the personification of lukewarm. Yeah, so it's not great, but I would pick this over a handful of movies.
That's fair enough. Well, I'd love to know what you think about X-Men Dark Phoenix. You can always let us know at cinemaheroes.com. You can also tweet at us or comment on our Instagram. Both handles are at CinemaHeroes. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment down below what you think about about X-Men Dark Phoenix. Where would you rank it among the X-Men films? We'd love to hear from you, however you want to reach out to us. But I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.